Good morning. Please grab your coffee and move forward. We'll get started here. I am happy to have Frank Dooley here with me to continue this conversation about the trimester calendar and building up summer. This is something that started a while ago, and I'm going to go through a little bit of the history of it, and then I'll turn it over to Frank because we've had a lot of very productive, I think, conversations with other groups, and this is an opportunity to extend that conversation, test it out on a different group, and move toward what we think will be, in some form or another, a great progress toward becoming a more efficient and effective campus. For a little perspective here, the main point of today's gathering is to keep you informed and to get your input. There aren't any surprises here. We're not going to make a major announcement. Sorry if you came for that. This is really a bit more mundane. It's when we really think about what we're trying to do here, there are a lot of details. There are a lot of generalities that we have to discuss. There are a lot of almost philosophical facets to this conversation. As you'll hear, there are questions that come up about the faculty role. There are questions that come up about the staff role. There are certainly questions that come up about a student's progress through their degree. But we really want to dive in, and it'll be mainly a Q&A. I'll start off with a few slides, and then you'll hear from Frank, and then we'll have hopefully at least half the time to banter some ideas about. And we found that we've gathered with different groups that we always are a little bit surprised. We learn another angle, another way of looking at this opportunity. So I'll say a little bit about the timeline. Again, just remind you of the background of this idea, this concept, and then talk a little bit about the campaign to build summer enrollment, which we envisioned as the first step. I think it really is the first step, no matter how we go. But we'll talk a little bit about what we're trying to do there, and then Frank will get into some details and options. In terms of the calendar and the timeline, how this issue evolved, it really came out of some discussions early in my tenure as provost. It was more or less a concept paper, and you may have seen it posted on the web, very short, about why don't we move toward a full-year calendar. What is the issue here? If we look at the literature, there are many examples going back some, 60 or so years, both in the U.S., Canada, and other parts of the world, where universities have tried to go to a full-year calendar. The agricultural calendar has prevailed for the most part. There are reasons outside of agriculture that is the case. Part of it's just custom. But we asked the question, why not? And Keith Murray, who's sitting here in the audience, did an analysis of the initial concept, and that was back in May 2010. And that really got us thinking, but we really put that idea aside. We kind of had it bubbling along in the background. Whenever I'd meet with Keith, we'd talk about space management and some of the things going on in the theory of scheduling and what have you, our usual conversations, and we'd usually finish our conversation with, so what have you given any more thought to the balanced trimester? But it wasn't anything that we had pushed very hard. Then came 2011 when we started talking about the decadal funding plan, and just to remind you, the idea was to look at the financial sustainability of the university, to imagine what Purdue could be 10 years out, plot a trajectory, and try to get there. And it incorporated the gathering of a lot of what we called big ideas, the vetting of those ideas. We had about 60 or 70 of them. And one of those was the trimester calendar. So that kind of survived or made its way into the discussion. And as things emerged and we started focusing on what would make the university more efficient and effective, as well as looking at many other avenues for creating a financially sustainable university budget. That one emerged along with things like the 24/7 university, talking more about not only using the facilities year-round, but using them almost around the clock. And there are elements of that we're still discussing. But the decadal funding plan, really the balanced trimester kind of jumped out of the decadal funding plan as something we really ought to look at carefully. So we looked at more thorough analyses. We did more financial analyses. And then in 2012, President Cordova announced that we were moving forward on the concept, developing the concept, building the summer toward a balanced trimester calendar. In January, shortly after the announcement, probably should have been before, but shortly after, I sent a letter to the campus community detailing where we were with the decadal funding plan and the balanced trimester concept. A few months later, we decided we needed what Vic Lechtenberg likes to call a designated worrier, because this whole concept was kind of out there and floating around, and various people were looking at it, but we didn't have anybody really driving it. And Frank Dooley stepped up. He was already engaged with some activities in the provost's office, including Impact, and this was something that he expressed interest in. So we thought we'd give it a shot. Last October, we had a very, I think, interesting discussion with the Senate. We had a very open discussion. Lots of great ideas came out of that. Frank will be talking about those. You may remember back in January of 2012 when Franz Cordova made the announcement at the Commission for Higher Education that we were going to be pursuing this. We received congratulations from then Governor Daniels, who felt that this was a spectacular idea, didn't understand why we weren't doing it faster, because we had talked about something like an 8-year ramp up, and we'll talk about the rationalization for that. But since he's arrived on campus, he's had a chance to look at it more carefully, and I think he understands what the various tensions are and what the opportunities are, and he's still supportive of it. So in short, we're still moving ahead, we're planning, and we're trying to take some action that would enable this opportunity to become an option, a serious option at some point. Whether it's right now, 3 years from now, or 8 years from now is what we're discussing. How are we going to do this? But I think we've made a lot of progress, at least in thinking through the idea, the model, and the pros and cons. But that is a process, and although we've made progress, we have much more in the way to go in the way of discussions ahead of us, and this is one step in that direction. So just to give you a little bit of background, what we knew at the time, back 2 years ago or so, was that the campus was largely idle in the summer. I'm talking about from an academic perspective. Of course, we have summer camps, we have conferences, so the campus isn't completely empty. But if you asked any vendor, any business owner in the neighborhood, they would tell you it's basically dead. And we have 6,000 undergrads on campus in some form or another during the summer, taking about 7% of the fall credit hour capacity. So if you wanted to pick one number that describes the activity level in the summer, it's probably 7%. The buildings are largely underutilized in the summer. We do cut back on power and cut back on heating or cooling, but still the buildings are more or less idle. And that's true around the country at most institutions. And we only had, and actually that number's improved a little bit, but back a couple of years ago, only 42% of our baccalaureate seekers were graduating in 4 years. We're up to about almost 46%. The number's increasing as we focus on it. But that played into the discussion. Matter of fact, I think that was interpreted from the outside to be the main reason to do this, was to move students through the pipeline faster. I think on the inside that wasn't the primary motivation, but it was one of them. Could you create more options that would allow students who want to finish faster than 5 years, or 4.5 years, to really make that happen? Perhaps even some could do it in 3 years, because the calendar would facilitate that in its mature state. And some do it now, but we only have about 50 a year, I believe, last time I looked, that actually make it through in 3 years. So what we heard from you and from the campus community in general was that we had a disincentivizing budget model, especially for the summer. And that's something that we have fixed. Frank may be talking a little bit more about that. I think we've got ourselves on a track where the summer is no longer, the financial model is no longer an obstacle. We had to actually change the way that the faculty are paid in the summer. It was a small correction, but it was something that was not, frankly, fair. It was just something that we carried on through the years, and we got that fixed. We are concerned. Some of the concerns over the idea of switching the calendar have to do with the course offerings being minimal in the summer right now. And it's a chicken or egg question, but is there enough now or even in the foreseeable future to allow a student to progress? The compressed schedule in the summer is a problem. We have talked a lot with the Senate about different combinations of summer sessions. We have all sorts of variety there. But the bottom line is that any way you do it, your course is going to be compressed, and it's going to restrict the student from taking multiple courses. They do, but it's really difficult to create a full schedule in the summer because of the compressed schedule. And really one of the most compelling arguments, and we heard this from students as well, is that the lack of summer options limits the fall-spring internship possibilities. So if a student wants to do an internship in the fall, and then they don't have the courses available in the summer, they've really made it difficult for them to finish on time. And we thought, well, if we could be clever about this, we might step out ahead of most of our peers and other institutions and really be in a position where our students have access to fall and spring internships that most universities don't allow their students to really take advantage of. So that's something, and we heard it from employers where they would welcome that. Not all, but many would. And the other possibility, if we think about it from the faculty perspective, is if we were to reach a state where we had a relatively mature calendar that was a 12-month calendar, that our faculty would be able to, in some cases, take research leave or whatever it may be in the fall and the spring instead of the summer, and therefore be able to do work, the kinds of work that they need to do and have trouble doing in the fall and spring because of the requirement that they be on campus. That creates all sorts of other problems. I'll let Frank talk about that, but those are the kinds of conversations we had early on. So in terms of the benefits, just to reiterate, more flexibility for students, more opportunity and flexibility for faculty. We did an initial baseline calculation and came up with the answer that net revenues in a fairly mature model could be in the order of $40 million annually. Basically, that's the concept there is we're creating more credit hours in the summer and using the facilities that we already have, so not having to expand the facilities to first order, and therefore saving money, essentially, or creating net revenue. That all presumes on the credit hour growth continuing. And the other area of discussion, and I got involved in this a little bit, is talking with the community about this concept of running Purdue essentially all year round. And of course, the business owners get very excited about the idea of a populated West Lafayette in the summer, and I think that's kind of obvious, but it's something that we have to think about. It's not as simple as it looks, but there are great opportunities there. The other conversations that we've only just touched on are with the local public schools, and whether a calendar change would be synergistic with things that they have in mind in the long term, or would it complicate the issue. Those are the discussions that have to occur with our local community. So, again, some of the assumptions or caveats, and I won't go through this in detail because Frank will have a chance to get into this and you'll have a good Q&A. We need to maintain the current momentum and enhance undergraduate applicant profile and demand for the summer population to make sense. I can say that even if we didn't do that, even if we stayed steady in terms of the number of students we serve, there would be advantages to the student in having the summer populated, just because they could move through more quickly and what have you. But from a financial standpoint, this would be synergistic. This move in the calendar would be particularly synergistic if we had an expanding demand for Purdue from our students, if that applicant profile were to continue to go up. And it has gone up consistently over the last 5 years, and we had a record number of applications, both graduate and undergraduate, last year. This year is too early to tell. It looks like we're going to come in very close to what we had last year. But we have seen that through the last 5 years, an indication that we could maintain our profile, serve more students, and have a continuing application growth, which might dovetail very nicely with the change in the calendar. But that's yet to be seen whether we can maintain that. And the other issue, the other caveat is that we inserted, I would say, early in the process, and probably a little too early, because it was a condition that allowed us to have the conversation, but we're going to question that, I think, today a little bit, is maintaining the current calendar until summer utilization is substantially enhanced. And we, at that point, calculated or estimated that we could get up to about 35% of the credit hours in the fall, in the summer. If we were able to get from 7 to 35%, then that would give us confidence that changing the calendar would not insert additional barriers for students to graduate on time, and would be worth the effort, frankly, that one would have to go through to make this calendar change. So again, that was where we were maybe a year or two ago, that we really needed to be to 35% of fall credit hours before we'd consider a switch of the calendar. So I'll leave that as the sort of the background. Frank will come up and tell you a little bit about the conversation that occurred with the University Senate back in October. Thanks. Frank?
Thanks, Tim. So, to go into the Senate, it was a session that might have been, well, we ran out of time. That we were there, I believe, 2.5 hours. It is on tape, so if you go to, we have a website, you can see all the questions that were asked. After the Senate meeting, Paul Robinson and I, we went through and listened to the tapes. We've classified them, so if you go to the Senate website and our Trimester website, it's all there. And we have roughly 100 questions that were raised that day. And like Tim suggested, there were some things that came up in that conversation. Go, that's a good question. And I think if you listen, if you go watch the tape, on numerous, people thought that a whole number of decisions were in place and we're running down this ramp and this is going to happen. But you know, over and over again, Tim emphasized, we're here to listen, we're here to figure out what are we going to do and what do we need to think about. And I would reiterate that today. It's another case where we're still in the idea, there's lots and lots of dimensions to this. I like doing Sudokus, right? And if you sit down and do it, they're 9 by 9. And what I like to tell people, this is really tackling about a 64 by 64 Sudoku. It's that complex, and there's so many things that are interacted, and you touch this and it affects that, and you have to be really careful as you start to look at these things. So a couple of the things that have really come through as we've looked at this, there were several people questioning, why are we going to wait to change the calendar? And I'll give some of the reasons in just a second. And then the second thing, and I'll call this, it's a very personal question to individuals, but at the end of the day, and my training is in economics, and economists presume that we look out for ourselves, we worry about how it's going to affect us. And I think everybody on this campus at the end of the day is worried, how is this going to affect my role? How is it going to affect my work? How is it going to affect my compensation? And that's a fair question, and we need to consider that as we go forward. So you know, and I don't know, most of us aren't even really sure what our calendar is. It's fall semester, spring semester, and then we have summer. And we haven't probably really sat down, well, what does fall semester mean? And there's all kinds of factors that drive that. There's a definition of what a credit hour is, all right, and we live with that. But basically, we teach in the fall and the spring 74 days of instruction. We have 6 days of final examinations. We deal with holidays and breaks and things like that. And then we lay out, this is our education. Okay? So in the discussion, as you listen to it, a number of questions are raised. And the first one, and I think these are all good questions of waiting to change the calendar 8 years. And there's a group of people who've said, you know what, I can see competing universities using that against us because this lack of clarity as to what our academic calendar is going to be might be perceived as a negative when we're trying to recruit new faculty. That was one point raised. We have a committee it's a Senate committee called Educational Policy, that has a whole number of issues, and we're talking in the words of calendar. I think we even need to restructure that phrase, and what we really should be talking about is how do we use instructional time. Okay? So in the terms of instructional time, we have exam policies. We have night exam policies, final exam policies. It's not an official word, but the word we all use is dead week. Okay? We have drop and add policies. All of these things affect how we use our time. Right? And I think it's the conversation we're having about considering trimesters, one of the nice things about it, it gives us an opportunity, and it's already surfaced in the Senate, to think about how we use our instructional time, hopefully more effectively. Okay? One of the things that faculty have stressed to me, they really like the idea of the symmetry, and if you look at the top here, it says 14-14, so that means a 14-week fall and a 14-week spring with 2 7-week terms in the summer. And the faculty said, I think it's going to, Tim talked about the compression challenges, especially when you have so many variants in what we have in summer now. I think this will make it easier for you to take a fall or spring course and teach it in the summer. The other thing is, should we go to trimesters at some point because we see a big growth, those 2 7s turn to that third 14 pretty easily. So that is some appeal. The co-ops program would love this. It simply would make their life much easier, and it would make the lives of the students in the co-ops program much easier because the balance once again. And then finally, several questions were raised. Well, have you done studies of the demand for students to be here in summer? And it's really hard to do studies when you don't have data, all right? And it's really, I mean, we can think about what might happen, but the reality is no one is running trimesters, and it's very difficult to forecast something without actual data, right? So to a certain extent, this idea, there's quite a bit of risk, if you would. And one of the things, if we were to change the calendar first, you get rid of that uncertainty question, so there's clarity to new faculty. Here's the academic world that we're living in. But at the same time, I really think with the 2 7-week summers, I think it's going to be easier to build that summer demand with that type of a calendar than what we have right now. Okay? So what we're really suggesting, and Tim said there's no monumental announcement, but there are 2 things I really think this campus needs to do. And I'm going to call them, there's 2 issues we need to delve in really deeply. And if you go back to that list of 100 questions we have posed, it really looks like there's 8 main sets of questions. But out of those 8 main, 2 surface. And the first one is I would like a task force that's looking at, should we shift the calendar sooner? Okay? And along with that goes this question, how should we use our instructional time more effectively? Now, the second thing, as soon as you touch calendar, you're affecting the appointment. So you have to have, I'd say, running in tandem with that, a second group of the question, so what does the faculty contract look like? You know, how will summer pay work and all those kinds of things that go along with that. So these things really have to work together. And we're going to be forming them. We're going to ask for representation from different groups. And then we're going to bring in some of the key resources on this, the people who know how stuff works on this campus. And we plan to get after these 2 task force very, very soon. I mean, within the week. Now, let me change scope just a little bit. I think the history, and what I was doing a lot in the fall was trying to figure out how we can do more with the summer that we have. And I think one of the ways to think about it, in a lot of the places on this campus, it wasn't that we hadn't thought about what we did in summer for a really long time. And I can find instances in certain programs where I think the way summer school worked is you went around and you started with the person with the most seniority and you asked, what would you like to teach? And they would say, this would be a good course for me to teach. And we might have course offerings, but they might not really work for lots of students. So what we've really been trying to do in the last few months, we've been changing the tone of the question, what should we be teaching on this campus to help students make progress towards degree? All right? The subtle change, as Tim mentioned, the financial model in how colleges and departments are paid to teach in the summer. If you go back, it was complex. It was hard for a department head to figure out because it was different. It was distance or on campus. It was different if you met your base or didn't meet your base. There were too many conditions. So it's really quite simple at this now for the heads. And basically, if you teach and if you hit a break-even point, if you would, you're going to pay for the cost of instruction, and then hopefully, and I mean, I really mean this, I would like to see this become a revenue source for departments to help fund the operations of the departments in the colleges. Okay? The response to that, a year ago, we offered 228. Now, this is not all the courses. So I've gotten written. If you want to think, this would be like the Math 223s and the Chem 115s and these are courses where are largely lecture-driven courses or distance-based courses. All right. So the special topics courses aren't here, and I've excluded quite a few. But if you go back a year ago, there were 228 of these courses. Out of that set, 28 aren't on the books for this summer. And if you look at them, for the most part, they had 9 or 10 students in them last summer. And I think those departments looked at, this probably wasn't a good fit. We added 90 new courses for this summer. And as you go down that list, The influencers for that were two. It was the head counselors. I met with all of them, and they said, this is a course we really need to have available to our students to help them make progress. We have more of those courses being offered this summer. Then the second set, we looked for really highly utilized courses fall, spring, and we shared that information with the colleges and said, you might think about teaching these. And a lot of these offerings came from that. So I'll say what we've managed to do so far, we've built the supply. It's better than it was a year ago. I'm encouraged by what it looks like. Now we need to build demand, and I just want to assure you that we're working on that as well. We have a web page that will be launched tomorrow, and the idea behind this, I'm not saying that every undergraduate student needs to be in West Lafayette this summer, all right? And I'm not saying that every student should finish in 3 years. I think an undergrad who finishes with no relevant experience is probably not much value to many people. Okay? So what we really need to get our undergraduates thinking, though, and this is a subtle change, they need to start thinking about, this isn't summer vacation. I need to think about, how am I going to make myself more attractive to employers or graduate school when I graduate in 3 or 4 years, whatever that might be. So what we're doing several things. We have built a web page, and on that web page, it's like a one-stop shop for everything summer, and that's the web page we'll launch tomorrow. We are sending postcards to the students. We're working with the advisors. We want an advisor to ask a student when they have their advising session in spring, what are you going to do this summer? And if they don't know, if you thought about doing an internship, if you thought about doing a co-op, if you're changing your major, maybe the best thing you can do is to stay on campus and catch up. Okay? Have you thought about doing study abroad? So just the whole emphasis of this is to get them to think about what they're doing with their summer. And that's where we're going. We're going to send emails to their parents and encourage the parents to have this conversation with their child, because the parents lots of times are still influenced. Or I have a daughter who's a freshman here, and it's just last week, one day she told me, you don't need to tell me that, I'm an adult. 2 days later, there's a decision she was running with, I don't know what to do, I'm not an adult yet. And I go, whoa. So maybe that's the new definition of what's a tweener, right? So at the end of the day, I'm really encouraged by what this campus has responded with and put forth for students. And I want to assure everyone in here, we're now going to work to help you make sure we can fill these classes. The web page is going to look like this. And like I said, we have the courses, the study abroad, the distance education, which is important to students. We have financial aid. The advisors are key to this. And students should be able to get to different things that help them figure out what they're going to do. This is one of the pages there that's just going to talk to them about the courses and what they might think about doing. And I'll say we're going to be fairly relentless in pushing this. We're going to run exponent ads and things like that. And really, we're changing a culture, if you would. And you're not going to change it in one summer. It's really something that you have to build as an expectation, so it's going to take us a while to get there. This is what the postcard's going to look like, and we call our campaign Think Summer. There'll be posters in the dorms, and you're going to get sick of this at some point. The second thing then that we have, and this has been launched, there is a web page, and the web page right now has 3 main buttons, if you would. The first one is the concept, and I think there's 3 links under there, and it points back to Tim's original paper that he and his wife wrote. Here's what we're thinking about, and it just laying out, this is what we might be doing. The resources takes you to several different places. There were a number of white papers written, 2 years ago when they're doing the decadal work. And I think it gives you thinking at a point in time. You shouldn't use those that these are our answers and what we're going to do with this, but it's more to show where our thinking was. And then we also have links to some of the literature that's out there, because there's all kinds of questions that arise as we look at it. And then we're building an FAQ. We need more Qs, and to that extent, the next steps, We're going to work really hard to build summer enrollment this year. We're going to get these task force moving. And then I guess the last point I would really like to make, to a certain extent, this is a grand experiment in change management. Because we're really, when you talk about changing the academic calendar, going to the trimester world, when you talk about moving more students to want to be here in summer to do that, talking about us having to change how we do our work and what we do, it's really a very, I don't want to say it's a difficult change, but it's so large that it's hard for us sometimes to imagine it. I think the keys, when you read the literature on change management, it says you cannot communicate enough, all right? And that's one of the reasons the Webpage is there, and we will be sending you messages through Purdue Today and other venues just to tell you when there's something important there that we want you to go look at and think. We will be having a series of forums like that. Sometimes they may be more informative because at some point we're going to have to make some decisions so we can then get to that next level, if you would. But the other thing I'll say to you is it's gotten really hard for me to walk across campus, and Shelley, who's in the back of the room, gets, you have a meeting over here at 10 o'clock, and I might do this. I was doing one last week, and it took me 20 minutes to get to the parking lot because 4 more people came up. I have one more question. I don't want to stop that. I want the questions, all right? And please bring the questions to me, because if we don't consider the questions, you increase the chances that we might miss something. I'm confident I haven't thought of everything. I'm confident that the people working on this haven't thought of everything. But there's a lot of smart people on this campus, and as they help us think through the challenges and the issues to think about, I think we have a greater chance of this being a success. And with that, we're ready to take some questions. We have roaming mics. The only thing I will suggest to you is we'd really like you to talk into the mic rather than just talk from the floor, because we are recording this, and this will be on our website tomorrow. So, question number 1. Yes? Oh, you gotta wait.
Do I have to introduce myself? That would be nice.
That would be really nice.
Hi, I'm Seth Brecher, and I'm very loud. And I run Air Force ROTC, and so I appreciate doing this because we need to sit down, look at calendars, because we have summer programs that they want. Basic question, if we go to the 7-by-7 week summers to start, what defines a full-time student? Because right now when we're in the normal semester hours, it's 12 credit hours per semester. The reason I ask is because it does affect the way that our scholarships are paid, whether or not you're on full-time status or not.
That is an example of one of the hardest questions out there. Sitting about 4 rows back is Ted Malone, our Director of Financial Aid. We have a definition, right? And there's different definitions of full-time for summer. Would that be accurate, Ted?
Yes.
Oh, 1 second. It's really nice when I can deflect these questions.
We have multiple agencies that define full-time for their own purposes. For instance, in a summer schedule, the Veterans Administration goes down and you've got a chart you can figure out if you take a 1-credit class over 1 day, you're full-time that day. If you and they pay accordingly. So it gets really complicated once you start going on interesting things. Graduate students are actually easy. Almost everyone says, you tell us what's a full-time graduate student and we'll say okay. The feds get much more complicated as we, typically we continue the 12 hours over the combined source being full-time for federal aid, but there are possibilities of doing it different ways. They just become much more complicated and require more.
Well, I think the important thing about it, this is one of the questions that affects a program, and we need to sit down and make sure that we're on the same page as we talk about this. But financial aid for summer is a very complex question, because you have to be careful on how you administer financial aid, because it could have implications for fall, spring. And many of those programs for financial aid are external to Purdue. So the Pell Grant program, for example, is a federal program. We need to live with that. And I think the fact if we're going to go to a different calendar, I don't know that's going to be persuasive to them. Okay, but it's a good, we need to talk. That's the point. More questions?
Hi, Jim Forney, Biochemistry. I certainly share the concerns about the sustainable model for the university and the cost for students. So I'm all on board about that part. As this idea has rolled out, one of the things I've tried to go and look at what's online and what's been talked about. One of the things that I have a hard time understanding is what the quantum leap in advantage is for the university. And so let me back up. I understand the idea of trying to increase summer enrollment, but it's going from that to changing the entire calendar and the trimester system that I struggle with understanding the benefits. And for me, I feel like, well, as you say, this is somewhat risky. I mean, there are not a lot of people doing this. And probably the worst case scenario is one in which we use thousands or tens of thousands of personnel hours to go through this change. And because every course has to be looked at, each instructor is going to have to figure out how to deal with whatever it's going to be, 2 less weeks. And certainly they're not going to just chop off the last 2 weeks of their course. So this is all going to take a lot of time. And so my expectation is that this is really going to be truly a big benefit to the students and to the university. The payoff is big compared with the risk. So having said that, can you deliver 5 simple, clear reasons why changing to a trimester is so much better than increasing summer enrollment? Let me give you an example. Is the financial end. I've never quite understood that piece, and maybe I just haven't found the right information. What's the difference between having buildings filled with summer students versus trimester students? Okay. Why is it that we're not just, unless we're talking about adding new students to the university, increasing enrollment, where that I could see if we can get students out more quickly, then we could increase enrollment and we could have more revenue. But so far I've not heard a discussion about increasing enrollment. And that in itself is maybe not so simple because can we get more students that have the standards we want? So you're not going to be able to probably answer all my, my questions, but this is kind of what I'm looking for is something on a website that would explain why it's a lot better that we go to trimester than just increase summer enrollment.
Okay. I think, and I mean, feel free to follow up with the question, but I'll start. Maybe, Tim, you want to give your response as well. My sense is one of the things that we're really doing, what we've said today is we really think we need to take a step back and rather, the original plan was to grow summer for about 8 years, and it's going, and they were measuring, if you go back and read those papers, they're measuring undergraduate credit hours, right? And those hours are going to go from roughly 30,000 to about 180,000, and that was that 35% that Tim mentioned. That became the trigger. And then 8 years down the road, we're going to go through this thing. Let's think about change the calendar now and be in 3 14-week terms. That was the original concept. Now, what my role has been, I've been, as Tim said, the designated worrier. If you read the Exponent last fall, they called me the designated warrior. And I think they go hand in hand. People who know me know, I really like to question assumptions, and I was very much along the same path as you, Jim. And one of the things, and then especially after we had the Senate meeting, it really escalated where these questions came. Do we need to go to a trimester? So in my mind, one of the things I like about exploring this idea of changing the calendar soon, if we can agree on this calendar 14-14-7-7, it gets rid of a lot of that. We may be 4 years into this, And we may discover that summer enrollment's going to increase from that 30,000. It may max out at 150, and we might not be able to grow it more. Okay? I think we would still be, as a campus, substantially better off, especially if we do a better job of bringing courses that the key courses that students need in their program of study to move through, to give them those opportunities to be off-campus fall, spring doing internships and co-ops. But it positions us to get to trimesters, but it doesn't require us to move to trimesters. So in a way, I think by looking at the calendar first, it kind of gives us the best of both worlds. That's how I look at it.
Yeah, let me just sum up the financial side of this in a simple way as I can. Right now, the summer is constrained by the length of the sessions, and even if you put all the sessions together, if you talk to a student about how they're going to assemble a program of study that would give them more than, say, 9 credits, it becomes a great challenge. Everything's compressed. Lab courses are difficult to offer. So the summer we have right now, although it limps along and will serve us, I think, well for the next couple of years, is limited. And that's where the original modeling suggested that getting up to about 35% in the summer would be a pretty significant achievement, given our calendar. If you expand out the calendar a bit, it becomes easier to offer, or for a student to pursue a full load during the summer. It makes it potentially a little more difficult to do the same in the fall and the spring. So there's a trade-off there. But overall, our initial modeling suggested that we could grow student credit hours by 25% over 12 months with a fully established balanced trimester compared to what we now offer. Now that presumes that we have the students ready and able and willing to come to Purdue and take advantage of those credit hours. And so there's an assumption there. Some of those might be by distance. That's growing rapidly. But you're correct. From a financial standpoint, the real savings, the net revenue, comes from an enhancement in the number of credit hours that we can offer during the full calendar year. And again, our estimate there was about 25%. We don't know what student demand is going to look like in the future. From the standpoint of, I mentioned earlier that our application pressure has grown recently. We are at a maximum, historical maximum last year for both undergraduate and graduate. At the same time, there are some other trends that do not suggest that rapid growth will be in the offing. One is that the number of students graduating from Indiana high schools is not going to go screaming up. If anything, it'll hold steady and maybe drift down a little bit just based on demographics. We're better off than the Midwestern states around us, but we're not going to see dramatic growth from Indiana. We might see some if we capture more. We're already seeing that there's some self-selection so that every year the profile of the students from Indiana who apply to Purdue West Lafayette has been increasing, which is a good sign, but the numbers have not been growing. Non-resident admissions presents another challenge. We have a lot of opportunity out there. We see a lot of growth, for example, from California domestically. But there's a lot of competition, and that competition is only going to grow. So depending on how we deal with that competition, we'll see how that works out. It doesn't look like a major growth opportunity. International applications are a significant growth opportunity. The challenge there, and we're very fortunate to have that kind of application pressure. We only admitted 40% last year. The year before we admitted I think it was about 60%, and we frankly brought in more than we could handle effectively. Last year it was a little more moderated. This year will probably be somewhere in between. But this is a market that could grow just tremendously. The challenge is how do you incorporate it into the curriculum? How do you deal with the inclusion issues? And we're working on those as well. And without essentially squeezing out our resident students. We're not in any danger of doing that where we are right now. But we have to be careful of that and cognizant of that going forward. So the bottom line is there's a 25% extra capacity potential by going to a balanced trimester calendar. And we have to generate the demand. We have to make sure in order for that capacity to be realized, without that, if we hold steady in terms of capacity, we're really talking about the issues that Frank mentioned in terms of being potential advantages, and they mainly have to do with moving students through faster. So it's a very complicated problem, and one that I think if we have a calendar that will facilitate that 25% increase, and we see the pressure coming, then we will be able to take advantage of it. If we don't do that, we won't be able to take advantage of it. So that's essentially where we are in terms of the financial part of it.
So just to clarify, so the number that's generated for the increase in revenue, that is dependent upon increased enrollment.
Yes.
That's projected into that figure.
Right, right.
Without it, this figure doesn't stand.
I would agree with that.
Okay.
Absolutely. There may be other reasons to do it, and we've already talked about those, but that wouldn't be a revenue generator.
Oh, now we're exploding. Pick somebody.
I'm Laszlo Lempert from mathematics. I would have two questions. One about the faculty contracts. I understand that there will be a task force which looks into that, but what are the options that will be on the table for this task force to consider? And the other, if we go, but this will only happen, I guess, later. What seems to be more pressing now is changing the calendar, 14 weeks. Will that impact compensation? And how do you think a legislature will look at this?
Once again, we'll probably tag team here, so this is almost like the cage, if you would. The reason it's a task force is because we understand this is complicated, all right? So we, the faculty basically now are paid. Their contract starts 1 week before classes in fall and runs till graduation in the spring. And their vacation days, if you would call that, when the students are out of session. I don't think there's any bounds that have been laid. So this is a task force which is really going to be asked to think what the alternatives are. And I think this gives us a really wonderful opportunity to rethink how we have our faculty compensated, and also defines, like Tim has mentioned in some of the sessions before, we may have people who the best term for them to be gone is winter, because that's when it's they field work or whatever they're doing, or their conference schedule or a travel schedule, and we would have those people, give them the opportunity to teach spring and summer, right? But none of those details, they've only been talked about in a very, very limited fashion. I think we have a fairly good sense of how the set of questions that affect this, but we don't have a solution to even talk about what it might look like, okay? It's going to require a lot more digging, if you would, and HR policies and all that. Did that get to both your questions?
I don't know. So the second question was
the compensation question.
Yeah, compensation for if we change the 16 weeks to 14 weeks.
Well, and I mean that's clearly something. And remember what I said very early on. As I've gone around campus, oftentimes we talk about the importance of instructional time, and when I say things like that, we need to think about how we're working with our students. And once again, I'm the economist. At the end of the day, everyone in this room, at one level or another, is worried about that question. It's an incredibly fair question, and we have to address it, I'd say, fairly and equitably. And the group we have people who understand compensation. There's HR policies. There's all kinds of things that affect that. So it's something we won't take lightly, is what I promise you, if that helps. There's one in the back.
Yes, David Sanders, Biological Sciences.
Yes.
I think you've misread faculty sentiment on this issue. I do not think that we want to eliminate uncertainty by changing the calendar now. I do not think that that's the approach, that when people are concerned about the uncertainty in faculty hiring and so on, that's the approach that they wanted to take to eliminate the uncertainty. when you talk about incentivizing the summer or changing the calendar and so on to make a trimester easier to happen, you always have to consider, I think you would consider as an economist, what are you not doing instead? What are you not incentivizing? I mean, obviously, if you're going to pour resources into encouraging more students to be at the summer, to encourage more faculty to offer courses in the summer, to change the calendar, what resources, what time is being used on this rather than on something else? What else would we be able to accomplish in terms of improving our curriculum, improving student success, if we didn't do this, if we did something else? The other thing is, if we're considering what to do with the summer, I think a real consideration, and we're thinking about focusing really on student success, I think a major consideration should be that we should be spending the summer on preparing students who are inadequately prepared for a college education. Now, that should happen in the admission process, but it doesn't. And there are certainly a large segment of the population who could benefit from some pre-college, college courses in the summer. And I think that if we had a program, if that's what we focused on for the summer, rather than this trimester idea, which has so many faults in it, if we focused on preparing students for their college careers, that would be a good use of the summertime. That would be what would actually lead to more student success in their college education.
I'll take your second comment first. You've identified something that, and I'll say the poster child for a program like that is Penn State, and they're doing a very good job. Typically these are called bridge programs to help students make that transition from high school, and you go back to the admissions question and in increasing the number of students. So we can find this. We worry about what our profile of students, their preparedness for Purdue, and there's a set of students who might just be slightly under what we're hoping for. But Penn State has discovered in working with them in a very deliberate way in the summer that they're able to take that set of students, and this summer they had 1,150 of them, and their success rate, and when I mean success rate, they're graduating them in 4 years, they're retaining them. So it seems to be a very well thought out program that they're doing. I think that would be a great use of summer. Once again, I'm not saying every student should be here in summer. Right? I think we need to there needs to be a wider set of opportunities for students. I think there are students who will choose to come in the summer because it makes sense for them.
Yes, but such a program does not require a change in calendar. It does not require all these other changes having to do with people's grants and this idea of trying to incentivize summer attendance, summer courses, and so on. I mean, this is, why not just focus on that as what we do with the summer, rather than this very unpopular transition to a trimester system?
David, I don't know how popular, unpopular the idea is, right? I know certain people question it, and I think I'm glad they're questioning it, because that's what's going to help us frame the debate. I think there is many people intrigued with the opportunity that comes with this, as who might question, is it a good idea? So I'm not trying to suggest that we shouldn't think very, very carefully about this. The reading that I've done and the studying that I have done, though, suggests the compressed schedules. We hardly teach anything in Maymester, and there's a whole bunch of reasons for that. It's too short of a period to teach many of the classes that we have. So if we have 2 7-week sessions, and Michigan State, if you want to lay out another Big Ten school who does very well with this, Michigan State is teaching roughly, we're teaching 7% of fall, they're teaching around 22, 23% of fall. And they run 2 7-week terms in summer right now. But most of their students are coming in the first 7 weeks, not the 7 weeks. And the 7-week period does give the opportunities for students to take the lab courses and things like that they can't push into that narrow of a framework. So I think what we have to do, I'll go back, the question about, we use the word calendar, we use the word trimester, but really what, in my mind, the fundamental question is how are we using our instructional time across all of the terms? And can we need to investigate if we adjust that, can we make this a place that's easier for students to make progress towards degree, but at the same time be considering how it affects faculty work and those types of questions.
We've had a lot of conversation about faculty workloads, and clearly that's an important part of the problem. But so I'm John Harbour from Earth, Atmospheric and Planetary Sciences. As I think, as a department head, as I think about the sort of ebb and flow of work in my department during the course of a 12-month period, for our staff, there are a lot of things that we get accomplished in the summer that we don't have time to do during the academic year. So I think having a staff group meeting and discussing implications for staff workload and what would the changes need to be in terms of staff effort? Would we need additional staff if we're not going to have that ability in the summer to do some of those larger projects? I'm not saying that it makes it impossible to change, but I think having that conversation with staff is really important too.
And we could not agree with you more, John. Actually, we intend to have a meeting with the staff. We intend also to have meetings with the undergraduates and the graduate students, and to continue having just regular open forums for the entire campus. Over there, then over here. And we're just about out of time, but we can stay a little bit longer. Yes?
Mary Beth Miller from General Chemistry. You quoted the statistic that 42% of students seeking a bachelor's complete their degree in 4 years.
Correct.
I'm curious about studies that have been done to identify other factors contributing to that percentage apart from course availability.
That's a really great question. I'm not the guru on this. There may be people in the room. Sue, do you have a good sense of what the Yeah, I put you on the spot. I apologize for that. I think part of it might be is that when we have students who CODO, that's one of the things that enter, and that's an internal transfer, and students end up moving from one college to another, and there's a number of credits that don't come with them. That's part of the challenge. It's been identified in other work that students aren't taking enough credits. So I mean, that's certainly an issue if they're not signing up for enough to get done. One of the other things that's changed since all this work started was the credit cap bill. So, most of our unaccredited programs or unlicensed programs are going to reduce to 120 credits. That should help students make that progress towards degree. We now have a core. The question I think we're going to struggle with in the next couple of years is how portable is that core as you move across campus. But when you look at it, and I think it's a fair thing to look at, but if you look at us relative to our peers, we're anywhere from 10 to 15% behind most of our peers. So we're doing, I don't know what the exact root cause is, but something that we're doing isn't letting them get done. I think we had one here. Shelley? We'll go here, then we'll get to you.
This is Raghu from College of Agriculture. My question is concerning international students, both the freshmen and also the transfer students that are coming in increasing number to Purdue. We are assuming that Purdue is a strong brand. I certainly agree. That's what I hear around. But we're changing from a herd of one color sheep to another color sheep. When we're standing alone in this crowd, how does this will be perceived by the parents of international students, because they are the ones who make the decision about 4 or 5 years back before the children go to Purdue, they make the decision where they should go. What type of messaging are we considering? Are we paying special attention in our web pages and other places to target these international student parents are about 3 to 4 years ahead of the game? I wanted to know what type of discussion is taking place in considering the international students in this mix of trimesters, which will be very attractive to them, in my opinion, because among these 45% of the students who are finishing 4 years, I presume the international students are in the majority. So how does that affect there, and what type of messaging Purdue is trying to make to attract or keep those high-quality students coming to Purdue?
Okay, very good question. Well, we haven't done any messaging about a trimester to prospective students because we don't have a message to share at this point. All right, but we are very cognizant of the questions that do arise with international students. There might be another set of students who, starting after the 4th of July, could be a good transition for them, if you would. They're certainly on our radar as something we need to be thinking about as we moving forward. But to the point of messaging about where we're going to be 4 to 5 years with this, we don't know. All right, we need to discover that. But you do point out, I mean, to hear that it's another part of the uncertainty part. When you talk to the people at admissions, they are talking now to, junior high students and freshman students. The process of recruiting the class of 2020 is already begun. So I think there's another area where they would like us to have some more, I'll use the word clarity again, as to what this campus is going to look like down the road. And I think, Shelley, we had one right here. He's been very patient.
I'm Antonio Saboreto from mathematics. There's something I don't understand about the model. For example, my understanding is that a Purdue degree costs X amount of dollars. And now are you asking parents to pay X amount of dollars in 3 years instead of 4 years? Would they be able to afford this? And second is an international, my understanding now is the international students come here because the dollar is so low. It's very cheap to send a child to the United States. I mean, if economy changes, how is this going to affect? And you're going to change this into a program, and then a few years we'll be stuck with the 3 trimesters and very few students.
Well, I mean, the economy always matters, right? But to the tuition question, obviously, if you're here, I mean, the tuition model that's in the model right now presumes that you will pay for credits just like you're paying for now. So if you choose to compress that and go year-round as a student, you would be paying for a 3rd semester in a year. But we already have students doing that, but they're not taking really a full credit load in summer like they do spring, fall. And we're saying by having a different calendar that allows a student to get more credits in a summer, now there's more value to them coming during summer to try to build that schedule, if you would. The challenge, and Ted was alluding to a little bit, the challenge is that the financial aid models that are out there for summer, some of these programs are very constrained, that they're built around a presumption of a fall-spring academic year, and they don't pay much attention to summer. Well, we have enough demand. Well, that's what we're studying. In essence, that's what we're trying to find out right now. And I mean, I'm hoping, I really, our number of seats, if you want to call it that, from the supply side, we're up about 30% over what we were last summer. And I think we're going to find out from the response of the students to what we've done if they'll come. If this doesn't work, then we're going to have to go back and ask other questions. Some of the universities around the country, because there isn't financial aid in summer, have discount models. So they discount tuition as a replacement for summer. I don't know. I would rather that we study how do they respond to our current tuition model right now before we discount too early. Great questions. One more. Kevin?
I'm Kevin Mumford from Economics. I'm curious,
is it possible to change the summer semester calendar without changing the fall and the spring? So if the goal is to increase the number of students that come in the summer, and one of the big problems is that every department, every college has their own course schedule for this. Some are 4 weeks, some are 5 weeks, some are 6, some are 8. And if you're a student shopping for courses, having all of these different schedules can make it difficult to get to get 12 credit hours. It's very difficult for the students. There's plenty of weeks in the summer, though, to get 7 weeks and have it unified across campus. I understand there's advantages to tweaking the fall and the spring, but that discussion is complicated. It seems as though changing summer immediately, in next year, not this summer, but the next summer, could happen quickly and without a lot of disruption for everybody else on campus. It may be big benefits for the students, although I understand that doesn't accomplish every goal you have in mind, but it could accomplish just getting more students here on campus in the summer, which is really where the revenue comes from, and that could be bridge, that could be international, it could be whatever, but that's the money, that's where it's at.
Well, there's a guy who knows a lot. Well, there's several people in this front of the room who know a lot about a calendar, but I'd say technically you can't do it. It would be very, very difficult. Would that be accurate, Keith? To change without adjusting fall, spring. Because right now in the summer, in our summer right now, we only have 13 weeks available. So you can't get to 2 7-week terms in the summer.
But you could get to 1 7-week term. And Michigan State gets all of their students in the first 7 weeks. Most. But that's what we want is most. If we had 1 7-week or 8-week or 6-week or whatever we go with, if it was unified, that would end all of the students having problems shopping across departments.
I follow exactly what you're saying, and I think that first term probably will serve our, if you want to call them our incumbent students, best. But I think this second, I mean, like what David pointed to, the bridge programs and things like that, the international students, things like that, I think the second half of the summer is probably going to be most appealing to them. So I think if we really want to move forward, we really need to consider both of these sets of students, if you would. So to me, I think it's better that we have 2 7-week terms rather than 1. And also go back to the education, the items in front of the EPC committee. Many of them are dealing with how we use our instructional time right now. And I'll throw out one of them. Many faculty say they really struggle with dead week. That in their particular class, it's almost worthless to them. So if we have questions like that, changing the calendar means this campus is going to have to face up to some very serious questions on how we want to use time with our students. And I'm not suggesting that there are very easy answers in how we do this. But, I mean, at a minimum, the other thing we struggle with when we start moving that is one of the things that are dorms and places like that are the people who run space on this campus. We need time between sessions to go through and work with rooms, classrooms, and dorm rooms and things like that. And if we get too tight, we lose that capability. So I think we've exhausted our time. But on behalf of Tim and everyone working with it, I would want to encourage you is please send us questions, ask us questions. We will be launching like this website tomorrow that's called Think Summer, and we'll get the message out to the campus. So we'd be glad. And once again, if you do see me in some venue, please come up. I'm glad to talk with you more about this and where we can go. Tim, anything else you'd like to add? Thank you very much for your time.